Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was recently created by Tomas on our Teton National Park workshop. Tomas was working with a Canon 7D, an effective focal length of about 50 millimeters. Exposure trio is ISO 100 f16 and 1/10 of a second. This is a detail shot of the back of one of the barns at Mormon Row, which is a famous historic homesteading site within Teton National Park. It's one of the most iconic locations in the whole national park system. Most of the time you see the barns sitting underneath the range of the Teton Mountains, and I've been pushing this idea a lot lately. Just want to come back again to it today. You might travel to a place like the Tetons one time in your life, so it makes sense to shoot the iconic mature locations, but I really encourage you when you're shooting those kinds of shots to look for ways where you can get images that are more personal than the mature shot. And one of the ways that you could do that is push towards the abstract by just shooting a part of the subject like Tomas has done here. Another thing that I like, in addition to the fact that this is more of a personal shot of the barns at Mormon Row, is I love the black and white conversion here. I'm a big fan of high contrast black and white. You can see that Tomas has got a real rich area of black or blacks in the image and a near white point. There's really beautiful local contrast. It's really pushing the feeling of texture, which to me is one of the main subjects of this image. Something else here, I really like the fact that Tomas has taken an angle to the subject. He's not shooting straight in, but he's shooting down the line at the back of the barn. You get perspective distortion that happens in photography where things that are closer to the lens appear bigger. So here you have these converging lines moving towards the part of the barn that seems smaller because it's further away. And that's creating a lot of dynamic movement on the x-axis. All of these lines are some version of diagonal movement. That really helps to move my mind's eye around in the image. There are also some really beautiful shapes here, just in the shapes where the construction material changes, the suggestions of in the log construction circles or semicircles, and then the implication of really beautiful rectangles, and then some negative space areas that are pushing towards square, other rectangles. Really beautiful image just in terms of both positive and negative space shape. A lot of things to like about this image. One of the things when I think about a perfect world variation that I think about for this image is I feel a little bit when I'm looking at this image like two ideas are competing. One idea is just the overall feeling of line and texture. On this part of the image over here, I just get a real strong sense of this repetition of texture and pattern. When I start to move over into this part of the image, I start to feel like there's more of a story here. There are some real powerful subjects that break up the line and the texture, the window and the doorway. Not only are these subjects high contrast relative to the values that are over here because they start to get really dark with some contrast in the middle, they're also very high contrast in terms of archetype. The side of a house or a barn, just in terms of siding, is not nearly as visually and conceptually exciting and archetypally exciting as the idea of window or door. And I really feel like this area over here could be more of a main subject, but it's competing right now, this area over here. From a design standpoint, that's happening for me because a lot of the energy in this image is right here in the middle. And this is just sort of pattern. Not only that, close to the middle there's a construction change, so I get pulled over here by the line and the bright, and then it's a little bit hard to get back. Whenever I'm looking at an image and I start to feel like the main subject may be in a place where other things are competing that aren't the main idea, I definitely want to play around with a crop tool. And when I think about cropping, to start off with, a lot of times I'll just think about basic crops. Right now, this is straight from the camera in terms of aspect ratio. If we go up to image size and look at the size here, we're looking at approximately 15 by 10 or 1 by 1.5, which is the original aspect ratio of 35 millimeter. There are two other exciting just basic crops. One would be the idea of panoramic and square. One of the things I like to do is to just go to the crop tool by hitting C and go up here and then type in a value that will let me, let's say, for instance, move around a panoramic or square crop. Now this image is about 15 inches wide, so we could just real quick type in 15 here, and if we wanted to move towards real classic panoramic, we could say, what about something that's 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. We could come somewhere in between that. We could just type in 6 or 7 here. Now, if I pull my crop tool, then it gives me this aspect ratio that's more panoramic, and I can move this around and look and see if I like it. Another choice, if I want to play around with the idea of cropping, a basic choice would be the concept of square. And so I could say, all right, I know this image is about 10 inches tall. Don't have to put in the exact amount, just preview this. I could just put in 10 here and then 10 here. And again, pull the crop tool, and now I have a square that I could move around. And in fact, if I look at the square, I can see that this is more of a pattern study. But if I move the square crop over to this side, I start to see something that I like quite a bit. There's now more of a chance for the windows and the doors to become a main subject. There's also a chance now for the feeling of shape to be more dramatic in the image. I like the way that this negative space shape is happening below the window to the right of the door, and before you get to this construction change. That's sort of a square that can play off of the overall feeling of square in the image. I'm also liking the way these blocks that are a support are playing off of the feeling of square, and just now how the window has become a much higher energy subject. I still have the pattern, I still have the weathered feeling of texture and of line, but I now feel like I have more of a traditional crop where my mind's eye knows where to rest at certain times in the composition. I'm not getting pulled back and forth so much on the x-axis. So I could either just double click inside of here to apply the crop, or get the crop tool back out and manually crop something that is closer to the square, but maybe not exact square. I really like this crop just right here. And from here, the thing that I think about doing is applying some darkening and really trying to contain the eye and maybe make this window more of a main subject. Right now when I look at the image, this corner's dark, this is pretty dark, this is pretty dark up here, but there's this big opening of energy here, and I'd like to create more of a feeling of a visual stop here and pushing back towards these ideas, and we could just do that just by darkening in those places in the image. This is going to give me a chance to answer a question from yesterday too, if you follow along day to day. Rick came in and made a good suggestion about using a blank layer like this as a burn and dodge layer. We can do that on this blank layer. Let's just copy our background now and pretend that we got good workflow. Come up to this layer, and we can go into soft light blending mode and now paint with either white or black. Black to darken on that layer, white to lighten on that layer, or we could just do one layer for darkening and one layer for brightening. Rick made a suggestion. He said, if you're in soft light blending mode, if you fill that layer with gray, so if we go to Edit, Fill, and then choose 50% gray, you're going to notice that nothing at all happens to the image. So watch this. In soft light blending mode, if I fill with gray, there's no value change or contrast change at all. But if I start to paint with black, I just hit B, shortcut for the brush tool, and I hit 2, shortcut for 20% opacity on the brush. Black is my foreground color. If I start to paint with black now, you can see that I'm darkening. And Rick's point yesterday was that it may be easier to see where I've painted if I go ahead and fill that in with gray. And in fact, it is easier to see. So great tip from Rick, and that'll answer a question that Usha, another community member, had about that technique. Hopefully that explains that. I'm just going to continue to paint here. I'm just going to continue to try and contain the eye and push back towards the archetype of the window is the main idea. We could turn this layer on and off now to see how that work is going. I'm going to darken even more down here at the bottom, even more right in here and in this corner. And there's more that we could do to this. We could continue to push, but for right now, I'm going to stop right there. If we go back to where we started, really love what Tomas did here originally in the image. It's really beautiful black and white tones. Really great job of coming up with a shot that's more personal from a very iconic location. Really nice job of taking an angle here to help to create some dynamic movement along the subject to the back of the barn. I want to say a big thank you for Tomas for participating in our Teton National Park workshop, sharing this image with us. I want to say a big thank you to you for being here. Hope to see you again real soon on another episode of the Daily Critique.